Hello and welcome to the Bad Take. My name is Tamara.
And I'm Himal. Today we have two special guests with us, and we'll just let them introduce themselves, right?
Hi, I'm Chav. I am on Twitter as Chav_. I joined the blogging scene, and this is how I got to know these guys all the way back in 2009.
I'm Thimal and I go as Thimal_G.
Oh, there's an underscore in there.
I think so. Yeah, and I'm a law student and I basically like keep an eye out for most political things in Twitter. So
today we before we proceed, let's talk about a certain incident that took place a couple of days ago on Twitter. So there was this incident involving a senior journalist, a former news anchor. This lady had somehow offended a prominent pro-MR Twitter personality. Can we call him a Twitter personality? Okay. And this guy is a bit of a foul mouth, and he's kind of like known for being very aggressive. And he had made some unsavory remarks, I believe. And this lady did not take very kindly to that, and she took what some people are saying were like really drastic actions, and he ended up basically losing his job. So today we are going to talk about the various implications of that, ethical or moral, or what do you guys make of it? Like, where do you stand on this? Like, do you think it should have happened? Do you think it was right?
Before we get into the actual incident itself, let's just think about the personalities involved, right? The lady in question was of sort of the older generation, and I wouldn't say new to Twitter. I think the account is several years.
2009,
Yeah,
But not very active.
not very active. Whereas the person that she went up against was sort of a member of the community, and very involved in Twitter over the years. So when something like this happens, I guess the people who are used to seeing it day to day would not take it as a major incident. It's sort of, there is that saying that when you are behind a keyboard, you get more courage, or you tend to lose sight of the humanity on the other side of the internet or the other side of the screen. But obviously, this was, in my opinion, bound to happen. One day, someone would get offended to the point that these things said online would take offline repercussions. I do wonder if this is definitely not the first time that this has happened. Maybe it's the first time on Twitter, but if you do remember sort of the tensions around racial hate speech on Facebook and to a certain extent on Twitter as well, there was a group that was naming and shaming individuals who were sharing those posts.
When was this?
I would guess it peaked around Aludgama, which was...
right. Yeah.
How many years back? 4?
Yeah, about 4 years ago. Yeah.
And I think certain people, I don't know if they lost their jobs, but certainly there were complaints made against their employees that your employees, perhaps during company hours themselves, were sharing these sort of hateful speech. Implications aside, there is sort of a precedent of this happening before. And I don't think this is something entirely surprising or entirely new.
basically, I feel like, see, I understand the argument of freedom of expression, and I don't think one should not lose their jobs for swearing or having a difference of opinion with someone else on Twitter. But I think there is always this fine line between abuse and calling out someone and saying you're this, and this is why you. And to be fair, some of his tweets are borderline dangerous.
Dangerous how?
Dangerous as in like promising violence.
Right.
And saying stuff like that. I think that's something. I mean, all of these things might come under the umbrella of freedom of expression,
Right.
but some of them aren't. Right? Some of these things are definitely insightful. Some of these things are definitely wrong.
Okay.
And so I feel like at some point of time, this will go offline, and this will
Right.
go off the whole reservation of social media and the supposed safety nets that we have as social media,
Right.
and it would have real life consequences. And the debate is whether, I think what happened afterwards and the whole aftermath that followed is really pertinent to the debate. Where do you draw the line here? So yeah, so I think that's basically, I think, where the debate lies. To what point do we draw the line and say these are the things that's important, these are the things that can be said, and these are things, okay, now you can't lose, now you shouldn't, now this shouldn't have led to something, a loss of a job or something.
Do we know on what grounds this particular individual was fired?
None of us know for sure, because I don't think any of us are very close to the incident. So at this point, we basically know from other people's tweets.
No, actually, he wasn't fired. He was asked to resign, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's how it's done, right? It is because firing someone
It's very hard, right? And
it's quite hard, because this country has quite stringent labor laws.
Right.
Even though people don't follow up on them, they are quite stringent and they are quite strong. And something like this can be taken up in a labor tribunal.
Right. Is that more prevalent in the government sector, in the state sector?
Well, it can be both. Government sector, there's a whole other bunch of rules.
Right.
State sector, and the private sector, there is other rules.
Right.
But the go between people is getting people to resign rather than actually fire them, because then that would involve with a whole other legal sphere. So
Basically, they are just looking to save their own ass.
yeah, exactly. And the cert does fall under government, I'm assuming.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a government authority.
Yeah. So so then I think it's even more difficult to
Right.
fire someone in the government rather than in the private sector. So I think that's the debate we should be having, not on exactly what he said, but where the lines are being drawn here.
Do we know if he actually said anything that was reason enough to go to this length? Like he was
Who decides?
Obviously, he was being out of line.
So yeah, who decides? There are different people have different tolerance levels of the kind of abuse that they can take. Also, certain words might mean different things to different people, right? Or different cultures might take different words differently. So there is one little point that someone brought up. Him being a government employee, I think government employees have a handbook on accepted
Online behavior.
no, generally behavior of a government employee, and bringing disrepute to the government service is a serious offense that can get you fired. He was tweeting under his real name, and his position placed him directly in the sphere of sort of online harassment, right? As in his responsibilities were partially to deal with online harassment.
Could we talk a little bit about his responsibilities for the benefit of people who may not be privy to what happened?
That's also a question I would like to ask, because from what I gather, isn't CERT more concerned with cyber attacks than harassment?
Right.
So as much as it is about protecting certain individuals or institutions in security wise, does that cover the aspect of security, or does it cover the aspect of harassment? Because I think harassment comes under child authorities and women and
That's
children.
true. But there were some allegations of hacking, right? And
Even-
that's a whole other kettle of
Even without the hacking, cybersecurity broadly would also cover trolling.
right.
As we recently saw, especially during the US elections and the French elections, Russian trolls were spreading fake news,
Right.
were attacking people, were sort of operating under the pseudonyms of people who had already passed away. It could be argued that the person who was attacked in this instance was a public figure.
Now, how do you determine something like that? I mean, this lady, for example, she hasn't been in the public eye for a while, I believe.
She's pretty active. Okay, so I think she was very involved in the recent democracy protests.
Yes.
Uh,
There was the video clip that was doing the rounds.
Yes,
I remember.
I think she was also one of the organizers of one of the protests that took place.
Right.
So we could define her as a public figure, right?
Right.
And then I think it would broadly fit under the responsibilities of CERT. But that's also a tangent, right? We can forget about whether he was directly responsible for that area or not, but as a public official, there is a certain sort of standard that is expected of people in the civil service.
Let's talk a little bit about the allegations that were brought up against him, because I thought some of them were completely absurd. Like there were allegations of this guy hacking into the lady's Facebook and Messenger, and at one point she even mentioned that he had access to her bank accounts, which I thought was, I mean, these are not things that you should take lightly, and it looked like the lady was acting out of, she was just carrying out a personal vendetta.
But initially, I think her complaint was pretty valid. We can all agree that he was an abusive prick, right? But then after a while, I mean, she started getting all this very positive feedback, right? And my personal reading of the situation was that she kind of let that get to her head, and she just kind of was on a power trip, I thought.
Some of her follow-up tweets also suggest that she was out to get sort of dissenting views to her own viewpoint. And also, yeah, I agree with Tamara. Like anyone can make claims that someone did something wrong, right? But really, before any real-world implications or they can be punished for those things, there needs to be an independent inquiry where they get to say their side of the story, and the allegations can be like sort of examined first before. This is the sort of thing that the internet often gets sort of blamed for doing, like this mob justice kind of thing. Reddit would go after footage of someone and like say that they're linked to a crime.
The Boston bombings?
Yes, exactly. And
I mean, you see the shit on Twitter pretty much every other week, right?
Yeah.
Somebody gets exposed and called out, and
their personal details are leaked without any regard.
Right.
One of the victims of this person said that her screenshots were being shared without her consent, without even blurring out what her name was, and like it was going all over the place. We'd expect the government agencies to be a bit more like not a mob, right?
Right.
I feel like all of these things, there is recourse in law, and the problem is when it comes to like online and IT and like on social media, it's still a pretty much a new frontier, because all of these come under defamation, and it's basically a tort. Basically, it's a civil wrong. So all of these would be covered under defamation, and these would be,
Do we have criminal defamation in Sri Lanka? It's a civil.
It's civil.
It's civil, right?
Civil. Yeah, it's civil. All these comments, and usually these cases usually go against newspapers,
Right.
and sometimes individuals. But then when it comes to individuals, it's spoken word.
Right.
So it's quite hard to find out. But then if it's on video,
Right.
like S.V. Disanayaka,
Right.
who famously went.
Yeah.
So I feel like now people are getting more aware of the fact that, if you remember, like people are scared to like criticize the recent Supreme Court judgment,
Right.
because there is a real threat of defamation.
Mm-hmm.
It's even on Twitter.
Unless you're a certain bald individual.
No, he deleted it though.
Okay, so just the fact that he deleted it kind of
Yeah.
insulate him from any action?
Well, I don't know, because basically
There are screenshots.
If there are screenshots, but one of the defenses is you can take it back if he apologizes before it goes wrong.
So couldn't S.B. Disanayaka have done that?
He did, but the thing is, he didn't. You can't do it after you go to court.
Okay.
You have to take it back, right? So I think basically what needs to be said, like people are generally getting more aware of the whole idea of defamation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's in a way it's good, because I think there are starting to give real life consequences for things you say on Twitter, because everything you say, like it's like this: people can say anything on Twitter, but then also they have to expect criticism. Whether it should necessarily lead to loss of job or like a mob mentality forming against them, that is, I'm personally not. I'm personally not comfortable with it. Right. But then, if you allow for the nature of human beings on Twitter to act like, if you allow for freedom of expression, then there is a chance of a hive mentality, and that would coming back to you.
Right, but as they say, free speech is like not without consequence, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think people are barred from making free speech, but then I think incidents like this, like, see, even the example with Sividhanayaka, politicians after that case are generally more careful.
Right.
Uttanitra Usaviye Tiranate api namana. That's a go-to line. Because if they say anything otherwise, there is a real possibility, there's precedence of you going to jail. So that's always there. And if I feel like this probably is a line in the sand when it comes to Sri Lankan online community. He did these things and then now there are consequences.
Right.
So like unfortunate martyr of all these things, I feel.
Took one for the team.
Took one for the team, I suppose.
Way to go, SB.
And other than the loss of the job, we also have to think about the victims of his bullying as well, right? So they might have been going through the emotional consequences of being exposed to whatever abuse he was spewing out. I know that the person who got him fired had her mental health history being like shared online and like saying this woman is unstable.
Did all of that come after?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not just his bullying, right? Like it's amplified, because then what will basically happen is his friends will. Yes, exactly. So yeah, there are real implications to that, I think, that we need to think about.
And there were other individuals who were deeply hurt by his actions in the past, who are now coming out.
One of the things they say is basically like, because of all these politicians using Twitter to further their political agendas,
Right.
it takes away the authenticity of Twitter.
Right.
And
Right.
that may be true. I genuinely see that happening, because like anecdotally, going on Twitter these days is like going going on YouTube without logging in.
Right.
Like everyone's like the worst of Twitter is on Twitter
Yeah.
without you not even looking for it. So that's the thing. Like it's very political. Twitter has become very political. I feel like I don't need to use Facebook anymore at all. And when things like this happen, it does call into question on whether how that certain person used this. I feel like the aftermath of this person getting fired was then there was a whole witch hunt on her part, and saying, okay, these people are saying these things, these, like, she was basically coming out saying we shouldn't make next up with Srinali Waduke. From what I get, what she said was their views are wrong, quote unquote wrong, and that's why they should be outed as well.
Right.
Which like jumps it's like a whole other thing, and that's when people start become uncomfortable with her as a person and her as views. Right?
And she was actually challenged on that view of us, I think, by somebody, and she kind of like gave a very vague non-answer.
I suppose that's basically that's the whole point of social media, and how it overacts and overreaches its own influence is basically happened within a day.
Right.
So that's why we should be careful, because this is why individuals should not take part in this. If someone is abusive towards you, there should be legal recourse. Okay. There should be because mob justice is infinitely worse than justice. Yeah. If there's some authority, you can say, okay, this guy is really abusive and this guy is actually faming me. And if there's a easier process to this, there isn't. That's the problem.
Yeah. Can that authority be Twitter?
I don't think so. Because I fail to see how Twitter. I don't think Twitter even acts properly in English.
Right.
I don't think I see neo-Nazis not getting blocked.
Yeah.
I don't see any of that sort. I've seen people who have opposed that views get more strikes on their profiles than.
I mean, they took forever to block Alex Jones, right?
Yeah. And see, that's the whole point, right? So, but then it's turning into making it a mob thing, or turning into communal justice sort of thing, only takes us back, I feel. Only takes the whole community back, and it creates rifts within the community.
What do you mean by community, though? Is there still a sense of community on Twitter? I know there was back in the day, in 2009,
I think
when we were all started getting on Twitter.
I think, okay, basically what I think is people get on Twitter not knowing anyone else.
Right.
And they make friends there. Right. It's different from Facebook. Right. Facebook, you find your friends. Twitter, this is a platform, you meet people and you grow with that. So in a sense, that is the community, rather than, actively hanging out, meeting people and getting people into Twitter just so that you can talk to them. So basically, I think that's what they mean by community, and that's why they're so I think that's why they got so upset, because one of their people who they made friends with over the years on this platform got rightly called out. So
Was there objection that he was called out or that he lost his job? I think that's an important distinction. No? Like
exactly, I don't think they make that distinction. I think they make it for everything that happened to him, called out, losing his job, and what for the funny thing is they never saw that side of him until it happened.
Right.
He was always abusive, if I recall. Yeah.
I mean, that guy was a prick.
Yeah. And then that was never highlighted in. I mean, apparently he was a very nice person offline.
As most people are, I think. A lot of these assholes online are like pretty nice.
The thing is, if you are as bad offline, you will get punched. Online, you are sort of shielded from the consequences of what you're saying.
So does that mean you're really an asshole?
Why would you?
Yeah.
If that assholery isn't within
Right.
you, why would you be so violently abusive online?
Right.
The things that he said are not like fuck off or something, right?
Yeah.
It's very targeted abuse, targeting people's backgrounds, targeting people's ethnicities,
Right.
yeah, sexuality, like gender, like everything. Like a woke person's like worst nightmare, right?
The anti-woke.
like a woke Satan. So you asked about community, and communities don't stay the same. The same village that started out might have different laws to the city known as Colombo that we have today. Like law evolves, people evolve, like definition of right and wrong also evolve, even though people try to stick to stuff that's very, very old. There are challenges in these, like the whole notion of instantaneously communicating with someone on the other side of the globe didn't exist like 100 years ago maybe, right? And with these new territory comes new challenges, and we have to evolve with that, right? And so having public figures on Twitter is one of their main draws. They are giving out blue check marks to all the big people, and with that comes publicity, comes presidency for some people who tweet very abusive things. And it also sort of makes you more visible to the rest of the world. So the same sort of standards that might have been there at the beginning of Twitter might no longer be valid. That's the nature of a evolving community, I think.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much dead on, because what I want to focus is like, is deplatforming the answer to abusive people on Twitter? Is it like, should we like, see, I feel like, okay, a lot of people are saying like, okay, this guy learned his lesson and he should be like, even she said,
Yeah,
if
she
he
herself said that,
if he
yeah.
has learned the lesson, because, but then would he?
It doesn't really strike me as the type to
No,
learn a
as it,
lesson.
okay, basically he lost his job,
Yeah.
and he then after that he was like, what everyone feels about him also came out.
Yeah.
So like, I don't think that was a surprise to him.
Yeah, I don't think that would have come as a surprise to him at all.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. But then suddenly he quit Twitter
Yeah, and Facebook as well.
and Facebook.
I checked.
Yeah. Where does that leave? So does that mean that all these other people who were backing him, I don't see anyone out else following him and doing the same level of vitriol against other people?
Right.
But does it mean that they don't have those feelings? Does it mean that they just, okay, I'm just gonna be a racist and like abusive inside and not share it on this platform, but keep on doing it?
Yeah, so they just resort to subtweeting or something.
Yeah. So does that solve anything though? Because I feel like it's a very difficult thing to answer, because like this is the debate whether giving voice or letting like people with terrible views
Right.
and say giving them the same platform, is that okay? Is that valid? Is that at some point we are trying to ban hate speech? I think you guys did an episode on this before, but then at the same time, is it still okay to do it, or is freedom of speech still very important? I think this all boils back down to that whole conundrum.
True. Okay. Let's for a second consider this incident from an alternative point of view. What if somebody were to say that this was tantamount to a kind of a class war? That there were elements of.
Okay, but this is completely personal feeling. I feel like there is classism in Twitter, right? Like in wider society. If we do admit that this is a community, it does have all the airs of the community, right? So one of the things is like, and it cuts both ways, right? There is like, classism against people who speak English and classism against people who speak Sinhala. But the thing is, this particular incident should be taken out of that context, because this is not just swearing in Sinhala or talking in Sinhala or just using a certain language. This is something a little more insidious than that. It is abuse. And when it comes to abuse, language is immaterial. I feel like abuse can be easily identified, even to a person who is not so strong in Sinhala. People can, this has crossed a definite line, and people can see that line, and so that's why it happened. I for a second don't think that this is because his detractors were not just the English speaking parts of the community. Yeah, because there were detractors who say, okay, what he said was wrong, and even people who supported him, the moderates said, okay, we don't agree with what he said, but what happened to him was wrong.
Right.
So I don't think there is a debate on what he said, just the consequences of it. I even though there's a definite class conflict within Twitter, I don't think this particular incident is a good example of that, because it kind of covers up the whole abusive side of it. Then we can just like shove it under, that's what all the English speaking people would want to say about him. That's why he's like, they can't handle him. And people who can handle him are his friends.
Right.
And they're close friends.
Right.
So they and I can see why they defend him, because they probably see different aspects of him. Right? I mean, let's imagine if Chav goes on a whole ranty thing and it was definitely abusive, I don't know whether even the best of us would say, oh, I know what he said was wrong, but we know different sides of him.
Right.
It will be, you wouldn't know what you do until you are put in that shoe. And no matter how good you claim, how woke you claim you are, you don't know until that happens to your friend.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's important to take that class concept out of it, because abuse is abuse.
Okay, no, that's definitely a valid point. But okay, what if I told you that there's a clear political divide between the two camps?
Twitter is not divided into just two political sides. There are multiple people with many political viewpoints on Twitter. Are you suggesting that one political camp is more prone to abuse of this sort?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying the people defending this character, from what I have seen, tend to swing one way on the political spectrum.
Two types of defenders are there, right? People who defend his actions and people who...
Exactly. We have to make that distinction, because I tweeted the whole thing defending his...
And so did Hima.
Yeah, but then I very specifically said that I'm defending his rights, not him. So there's a distinction that needs to be made.
And I know for a fact that some of the people who defended his right to not get fired were very opposed to him politically and had even been subject to his abuse previously.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's very easy to see things binarily, isn't it? Like the two political camps or the two classes or whatever. I think that's a very
but I think basically one of the things is that's an accusation one political camp makes about the other.
Right.
Oh, these people are all this kind of people, like abusive. Focuses on language is definitely made by the more affluent parts of Twitter towards less affluent parts of Twitter.
Use your words very carefully, my friend.
No, I see it all the time.
Yeah,
Like, this is how they talk. So when there's an argument, it's like, oh, this is how you talk. And
Right.
I think clutching of pearls is a very apt term here.
Yes. There was a lot of clutching of pearls.
Yeah. And usually the people who have the money to have pearls clutch the pearls.
Right.
So,
But hold on, is that also an age thing?
I don't think so. I don't think people go hide under class very fast, whether they're old or not.
No, but when confronted by somebody like this guy, would you say older people are more prone to like reacting defensively and?
I guess older people are more offended by it, right? That someone younger than them is like attacking them. And I guess society has also changed in a way that these were not, so it was not common to find this kind of interactions in our parents' era or whatever.
Because we grew up on the internet, right? Like we took all kinds of abuse.
Yeah, and
But-
you've been on 4chan.
Yeah, exactly. So, like these people wouldn't last a day on.
Yeah, I mean,
4chan, right?
if you hang around Elagiri.com
Yeah, even Elagiri, exactly.
during political time,
Yeah.
like election time,
Right.
that's some serious shit going down there, man.
But I think that's the wrong place to take this conversation to, because then we're gonna have to talk about like gatekeeping and shit like that, and which is somebody had actually proposed that I saw, like me argument or some shit like that, and I mean just take the hashtag alone, SS auntie.
Yes.
There's a clear ageism there, right? Like why are we referring to her in like ageist terms?
A bit of that might have also been because of her tech illiteracy.
Right.
I thought that was a Godwin's Law reference.
Nice one. But yeah, to answer that question, like, where do you guys stand on that? This whole thing about old people basically being deplatformed, for the want of a better word.
To sound like a typical woke person, I'm going to ask, should the platform be more inclusive of...
Of course it should be, yeah.
Yeah, so the main demographic that was there at the start of Twitter would be young males,
Right.
right? Now it's grown to older people, maybe like children even, or women, the minorities are there more. It was founded in Silicon Valley, right? So it was mostly white people on it
Right.
at the start. The Sri Lankan community, we know about the start of the Sri Lankan community. It was very English-centric when it started.
Pretty insular, like a bunch of techies and a couple of journalists.
Journalists,
Yeah.
techies,
And
and
some bloggers,
marketing
yeah.
people, yeah.
Yeah. And then the social media marketing guys kind of came on board.
Yes. And with them came
Yeah.
a bigger market for them to market to.
And they ruined it.
I don't think people should be like, there shouldn't be ageism on Twitter, because I think Twitter is far more interesting because the more yeah, and see, like we follow like couple of accounts which I don't see on Facebook. Like, we don't want to name names here because then they'll ruin it. But then I feel like Twitter is actually quite diverse. Right. And seeing her at Twitter, and I hate saying that because that would acknowledge a dichotomy in the community. Seeing her at Twitter is incredibly different. There are far more different views and like open views, and people talk about a lot more things.
It's certainly a lot more entertaining.
It is. And I feel like seeing her Twitter is more unrestricted.
Right.
They talk about things because they don't have this chip on their shoulder like, oh, I might meet these people on a party or something else. And you know how people censor themselves from saying things that they want to say because, okay, that it like social like capital in the English Twitter is like really valuable apparently. Right. Seeing her Twitter, it's like, it's fine.
Yeah, because that shit can actually get you fired.
Are we circling back?
yeah, that's not bad.
No, but then I don't think people.
But you're saying essentially the risks are greater for the English speaking class,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Class. Ugh.
Yeah. So I think more people should get on Twitter. People say people like Facebook Saranagato is a really
Yeah.
really cool.
I think then Facebook came up.
I don't think so because I feel like Twitter only gets better because of the more people. It is more representative that way.
Right.
I don't think this as a community. Okay, as if you keep using the word community as a community, I don't think it was as representative or as unique when there were just bunch of like the English
Right.
techies and English speaking community there.
Right.
Because I don't know, that's coming from a quote unquote new tweep. But then I feel like now it's, even though it's for us, it's like sometimes it's really okay. I don't want to deal with this now.
Right.
But then it is society, right? This is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Terrible people, good people, and everything in between.
Yeah, I feel we can end on that note. I think Right then. All right. Nicely done.
Okay, so in closing, do you guys have any more things you want to say?
Parting thoughts.
Yeah,
last
any
words?
parting thoughts? Any last words before you lose your jobs?
I think people should generally be aware of what they post and think about what they post. Especially if it's abusive towards other people, because it's not.
If it's abusive, you just shouldn't post it.
Yeah, true. That's what I meant. In a nicer way.
But the thing is, like, there will always be assholes, right?
Yeah. But then I think everyone generally can tell what the line is and
Right.
whether you should not cross it or not. But on the other hand, I don't think it's up to an individual to call out someone and go to the lengths to make someone lose their job. I don't think that should be done, because it sets precedents, and it also when there's no judging these things, precedents can be taken into all kinds of places, right? Because basically what the a judge is there for is to say that, okay, these things happen this way and that's why this should happen this way. If there's like an objective person or like who would say, okay, since he did this. See, the blowback to her and her outing of her mental status is people thought that was directly in proportionate to what she did. It wasn't. Yeah. So when you start something like that, it's difficult to figure out the line. So I don't think people should take joy in someone losing a job, but I understand why it happened.
Would you say he deserved it?
I think with the particular job he did, and
Given the nature of his job.
given the
yes.
nature of his job, I think, and the particular nature of what he said,
Right.
and how he said it, and his history as a person who did it, I think it's inevitability. But at the same time, there is a certain unease of mob justice all the time. Because as Thimal rightly pointed out in history, we don't know what the investigation was. We don't know whether he was given due process.
We don't know if there's an investigation at all.
At all. Basically, someone hears something bad about you,
Yeah.
and they decide, okay, now I think you're getting bad press to the company. Why don't you pack it in? Is that right?
Right.
Without anyone looking into what you did.
Right.
Because if we follow that precedence, I think some things we tweet in the past. See, Kevin Hart not being able to host the Oscars. Yeah, for something he said.
Right.
Is that right? That's very open-ended, right? He did, and that was the opinion of his, that he doesn't want his son to be gay, and look how it came back. Not that there's a comparison.
And
by
he has
the way.
apologized for those views. I
Yeah,
think.
exactly. And
Like you said earlier, like our views evolve, right? Like, and then should we be punished for things we said in the past?
So parting thoughts, I guess free speech comes with caveats. You say one of the prime example is you can't shout fire in a crowded cinema and call it free speech. You are endangering someone's life. So I guess having a conversation online doesn't shield you from the outcomes of what you've said, right? If they have real world consequences, you have to sort of accept them. And like you guys pointed out, Twitter is there are more new people on Twitter. the older crowd would just ignore the troll and like not feed it, but newer people might not try to keep it online. They might take it offline, and here's what happened. I think I agree broadly with what Thimal said, that there should be somewhere independent that people who feel victimized can go and can get some sort of remedy, right? If your fundamental rights are violated, you can go to the Supreme Court, right? That is a right that every citizen of this country has. So what if you are being bullied online? Where do you have to go? Like, most police stations I know from personal experience do not accept complaints of this type. People I know have gotten death threats, some of my co-workers, and there wasn't any action taken, and there was no remedy for that situation. So I think that is need. With these new communities, with these new platforms, come new needs to protect people from what they face on those platforms.
Just one more thing. I mean, I hate to keep going back to this whole class thing, but I think this lady came at it from a position of privilege, and therefore she was able to like pull certain strings, and it was because of who she was that she was able that she was able to get this outcome, right? Her desired outcome. And
but then the guy was also in a position of privilege. He was a
right.
member of the government. I mean, like a government servant, right? So
you said he's not a Padimin here that day, no?
Yeah, he's not, right? Government servants tend to be very entrenched. They are very powerful in their spheres. They are protected by all the institutions, right? This guy has had complaints many times going to CERT that he was doing this, but he got promoted. He was like doing foreign trips. He was doing seminars about cyberbullying that were video taped and like put on YouTube. So I guess it took someone of that privilege to take down this guy. Like, I don't think either of them are normal everyday Twitter users. They're both very powerful individuals who got into a fight and someone lost their job.
So I guess then we leave with the question of setting precedents, right? Which is an open-ended question, I suppose.
And the need to have a better path of justice,
right,
to these people who actually get cyberbullied. I mean, the community can do something. I think what the community can do is when you see it, call it out.
So self-regulate, in other words.
Yeah, because half of these problems happen because the community didn't want to call it out, and for some until someone lost a job. And in that sense, that's a bad community.
Right.
But then, if the community doesn't call it out, then the authorities have to, like, people need to have a way to, like, seek redress. And as it happens, there is legal redress. I feel like there are people, in England especially, like, people do use libel very, very strongly. Especially on the internet. Especially on Twitter. So, I think only a matter of time before it comes here.
As of now, we don't have those laws and regulations, right? We don't.
Does
our Cybercrimes Act cover any of that?
No, but then defamation does.
Defamation, okay.
Yeah, and Nama Rajapaksa and everyone like deleted all of their videos, live streams after the Supreme Court judgment. Right. They deleted it because they was genuinely worried that some of them would say something which is defamatory or in contempt of court.
Right.
So people, like, if you're in a position of power and if you are people need to understand that they are responsible for what they say, and either they get corrected on that or they might be taken, someone might take action against them.
And to add to the self-policing of the community, most people tend to ignore these things, right? Because it's very unpleasant to get caught up in other people's fights, right? Even if it's someone that you care for getting bullied, it's like, you don't go to Twitter to like fight, you like go for a good time, right? You want to like tweet about your cat and stuff. So I think it's better to have like a proper body that is responsible for it.
Alright, then this has been a very fruitful discussion. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thanks for having us.
Alright, cool. Catch you guys next time. Peace.